In some plants, centrifugal pumps seem to last forever. But in others, pump failure is a big problem. In fact, in some industries, the average time between pump failures is about 6 months. Now, some pump failure is unavoidable, especially when a pump is operating under conditions that are less than ideal. For example, a pump that's handling fluids with suspended solids, or one that's pumping fluids that can break down pump parts, is going to cause operating problems. But a lot of pump problems can be avoided if you remember 3 things. Keep it clean, keep it lubed, and keep it aligned. Cleanliness is critical to reliable operation, and this is especially true anytime a pump is pulled apart for service. For example, handling a seal with dirty hands is more likely to cause pump problems than pumping dirty fluid. Lubrication is just as important. Now, most people know that moving parts need lubrication, but they may not understand the special lubrication needs of a pump. It's not enough to make sure the bearings in the pump and driver are properly lubricated. You've got to make sure the correct seal pressure is maintained, and on packed pumps, that the proper leakage rate is maintained. Finally, alignment. Many people, even experienced people, do not take pump manufacturers' alignment requirements seriously. But to get the most out of a pump and its driver, you've got to take the time to align it properly in the first place, then keep it aligned. These 3 problem areas, contamination, lack of lubrication, and misalignment, account for the majority of pump failures. The more you know about how they happen and how to keep them from happening, the less trouble you're going to have with pumps. Now, we're going to take a look at 3 common pump procedures: servicing a leaking pump, starting a pump up and shutting it back down again, and monitoring the operation of a pump. As we go through these, keep in mind the 3 keeps. Keep it clean, keep it lubed, and keep it aligned. Let's begin by replacing a leaking mechanical seal. Because there are a variety of mechanical seals as well as many kinds of pumps, it's very important to follow the specific instructions provided by pump manufacturers for use with their particular pump. But before you start to replace a seal, you must observe the proper shutdown procedures. The first step is to make absolutely certain that the drive cannot be started while you are near it. But besides electrical lockout, there may be other very important lockout procedures. Locking or tagging out closed suction and discharge valves can be a life and death matter, particularly if the pumped fluid is hot or otherwise hazardous. If some of your pumps handle potentially dangerous fluids, exercise caution when you are anywhere near these pumps. For example, in some cases you may have to wear personal protective equipment. Sometimes even a leak can be fatal. Besides protecting yourself, you must also protect the pump. The discharge must be shut, not only to protect yourself from any harmful chemicals, but also to protect the pump from excessive backflow. Backflow can unscrew an impeller, or even turn the pump faster than its rated safe speed. Whether the discharge is shut before or after the driver is turned off depends on your situation. But if the driver is turned off first, make sure the discharge is shut as soon as possible after that. Another way to protect the pump is to allow it to receive lubrication for as long as possible. If the pump receives external cooling and you must shut it off, it's usually a good idea to wait until after the pump is turned off. Only after following the proper shutdown procedures are you prepared to actually remove the pump to a convenient work area for seal replacement. The exact procedure for replacing a mechanical seal will vary with the pump and seal design. Yours may be different from the one shown here, but there are a few things that everyone needs to keep in mind. First, clean the inside of the pump and make sure it's in good condition. If your pump has a stuffing box, clean it out thoroughly. Any scale which is formed inside the pump could work loose and find its way into the seals. Second, carefully check the shaft for any burrs or gouges that might damage the seal or prevent sealing. And if there is one, check the shaft sleeve for scoring, burning, or cracks. Now, before you actually replace the seal, be sure of 2 things. First, make sure you've got the right seal. Check the part number. Second, make sure your hands are clean and that you're working in a clean area. Unseen dirt or scratches on a seal face can ruin it. Inspect the new seal right out of the package to make sure it's not warped or scratched. To work properly, A seal must be in perfect condition. A single dirty fingerprint can ruin it, so there's no sense installing it if you're not certain it's perfect. If there's any doubt, set it aside until the manufacturer can check it. Getting the right clearance between the seal faces is critical. If the seal faces are too tight, they won't be lubricated properly. If they're too loose, they'll leak. Some pumps have a shaft sleeve with a lip or shoulder that accurately positions the seal. Remember though, there are a lot of different seal designs and arrangements. When installing the seal, make sure you read and follow the manufacturer's installation instructions very closely. When reassembling the pump, make every effort to keep contamination out. Unlike mechanical seals, packing requires a certain amount of pump leakage for proper lubrication. But when the leakage can no longer be controlled by tightening the gland nuts, the packing needs to be replaced. Many leaking packed pumps can be serviced without opening up the pump casing or disconnecting the driver. Remember, before starting work on any pump, lock it out properly. Use a packing puller or hook to remove the old packing. It is almost impossible to remove the packing without one. And remove all of the old packing. Don't attempt to save time or money by not removing and replacing all of it. If you do, the pump will just have to be shut down and repacked that much sooner. Don't be fooled into thinking you've got all the packing just because you've hit a solid object. If there is a seal cage or lantern ring, be sure to remove it too, and then the rest of the packing. Try to clean the shaft or sleeve, and check for scoring as well as you can. In many pumps, this can be difficult because this part of the pump is very cramped. Start repacking by checking the pump manufacturer's instructions for the type of packing and the number of rings. If you're using coiled packing, cut the rings at the workbench where you can work carefully. Wrap the packing around a rod the same diameter as the shaft, then cut it diagonally with a sharp knife to get a good tight fit. Carefully place the new packing along the shaft, one ring at a time. The joints should be staggered a quarter turn apart so they do not form a straight line. This helps to ensure lubrication flows throughout the packing. Be patient. The packing may not always go in easily. You can use the gland to help force the packing into place, but do not compress it too much. Packing that is too tight will smoke at startup, and the entire packing process will have to be repeated. If the pump uses a seal cage or lantern ring, proper placement is essential, so carefully follow the manufacturer's directions. If placement is off, the fluid required for adequate sealing and lubrication cannot enter the stuffing box freely. When the right number of rings has been installed, replace the gland, snug up the gland nuts, and then back them off until they are less than finger tight. Now in this case, we made no changes in the driver. But if a motor had been swapped out, or if it were rewired, it's important to make sure that the motor rotates in the right direction. Do not connect the driver when checking rotation. Accidental reverse rotation of a pump can destroy it. When you're servicing a pump, you should also take time to check the alignment between pump and driver, even if you have not disturbed the alignment. Because alignment is often taken for granted, the pump may not have been properly aligned in the first place. And sometimes, pumps and drivers shift because vibration and age loosen piping supports. Pump manufacturers often call for pump and driver alignment to be within just a few thousandths of an inch, but you should check the specifications for the pump and the coupling. Sometimes, a specific amount of misalignment must be set to allow for expansion of the pump when handling hot fluids. Now, when you check the alignment, you'll rotate the pump and driver by hand, so you'll know if it turns freely. But even if you do not check the alignment, you should always make sure the pump shaft turns without binding. There could be something caught in the impeller, or the pump and driver could be badly misaligned. Before you actually start a pump, there are 3 important things to remember: safety, lubrication, and priming. First, never operate a pump without its guard in place, and never remove any lockout you didn't put there. Find out why it is there before you do anything else. Second, whenever pump parts are moving, they need to be lubricated. If the pump uses an external flush, open external seal valve so the pump will receive lubrication even before startup. Using the right amount of pressure in the seal flush is important. There must be enough pressure so that the cooling liquid is forced around the seals or into the packing. However, too much pressure may shorten the life of the seals or unseat the packing. The correct fluid injection pressure may be anywhere from a pound or two up to 20 or more pounds. Carefully follow the manufacturer's instructions. If the pump is internally sealed and uses a valve to control injection flow, the valve should be no more than halfway open until the pump is fully primed and operating. Then, adjust it to its normal setting. No matter what kind of seal you use, it may leak a little at first. Give a mechanical seal a little time to wear in before worrying about tearing down the pump again. When adjusting the leak rate on a packed pump, adjust the seal and gland pressure gradually, in small increments about every 15 minutes or so. This gives the packing time to respond to the changes in pressure. Lubrication as well as cooling for the pump is also supplied by the flow of pumped liquid. If your pump uses a suction valve, make absolutely sure it is completely open before starting the pump and while the pump is running. If the flow is restricted, the pump will work harder, be cooled less, and it may be damaged by the excess heat. Remember, too, that the pump casing is not the only thing that needs lubrication. Make sure all bearings are properly lubricated. This may mean adding oil or grease to a system, or perhaps turning on a lubrication system. Third, and finally, the pump must be primed. This means that all the air inside the pump and inside the piping must be forced out. A pump that is not properly primed may overheat if there's not enough fluid to provide cooling. And air or other gases in the fluid can cause pump cavitation that destroys pump parts. Now you're ready to start the pump. Whenever a pump is started, make sure you know the correct startup procedure. Many pumps should be started first, then have the discharge opened. Others, particularly low-speed pumps, should have the discharge opened first. If the discharge should be opened after startup, make sure it is opened within 10 seconds and open it slowly to minimize vibration from fluid hammer in the piping. Once the pump has been started, pay immediate attention to the discharge gauge. Make absolutely sure that fluid is flowing through the pump. If you lose pressure after starting the pump, you've lost prime. Do not let the pump run on. Remember, the pump must have liquid flowing through it for lubrication and for cooling. If prime has been lost, do not keep starting and stopping a pump in the hope that it will somehow prime itself. Check the suction valve once more to be sure it is fully open. Check for air leaks if you can't find any other problem. Repeated starting and stopping may burn out the motor. Find out the cause of the problem and fix it before attempting a restart. On the other hand, if a pump is able to reach operating pressure but has a loud crackling sound after startup, then small amounts of air or other gases are present. The pump may not have been fully primed. Shut the system down and try again. If that doesn't solve the problem, and if you can't find where air might be getting into the system, check with your supervisor or with the pump manufacturer. You may be having problems with cavitation, and you may need to change pumps, impellers, piping, or some other part of the pump system. Okay, let's suppose the pump has been operating quietly for about an hour. If you are pumping a hot liquid, it may be necessary to stop the pump to check its hot alignment. That's because a pump may expand when pumping hot fluids, but the motor may not. A pump and driver that were aligned when cold may be seriously out of alignment at normal operating temperatures. Now, if during operation you need to reduce the flow of a pump for a short time, do not throttle back the suction line. If you do, you will seriously reduce the pump's ability to cool itself, and you will probably cause the pump to cavitate. Instead, to reduce flow temporarily, throttle the discharge. Even then, be careful. The unbalanced pressures that are generated may cause pump and piping vibration and even shaft deflection. This shortens the life of the seals and the bearings, and the pump can actually get so hot that the pumped fluid will boil, even though the motor driving the pump is never overloaded. Finally, an important part of pump maintenance is to keep track of operating conditions and pump performance. How often each part of a maintenance schedule is performed depends upon the conditions under which the pump is operating. Whatever the schedule calls for, the important thing is to follow it. Here are some basic guidelines. Check stuffing box leakage and seal flush pressure daily. Lack of lubrication is the primary cause of packing failure. On pumps using mechanical seals, proper flushing will help keep the seal faces clear of contamination, which is the leading cause of seal failure. Make sure other moving parts receive lubrication as well. How often bearing lubrication needs to be checked depends on the system and the operating conditions. Keep the pump properly lubricated. Check bearing temperature regularly. Under many conditions, you should check it daily. Many pump bearings normally run between 140 and 150 degrees Fahrenheit, so be careful. You'll probably need a thermometer or pyrometer to accurately and safely check pump bearings. Bearings that are too hot or show signs of vibration are indicators of problems. These problems may include over-lubrication, severe misalignment, equipment which needs bolting down, or piping supports which have loosened. It's often a good idea to check bearing housing vibration once a week. Some manufacturers suggest daily checks of pump performance, especially if uninterrupted service is critical. You may want to include the pump's flow, the power consumption of the motor, and the discharge and suction pressures. Record any changes along with the hours of operation. Changes in pump performance can point to specific pump problems, as well as prepare you for possible pump downtime. Routine overhaul practices vary widely, but it's usually a good idea not to open up a pump until your recorded observations show the pump needs replacement parts. Every time a pump is opened up, you run the risk of contamination. Keeping careful records can help you predict when a pump will actually need to be overhauled and will greatly reduce the chance of opening up the pump needlessly. Whether you are replacing a seal, replacing an impeller, or performing routine maintenance checks on a pump, remember the three main trouble areas: contamination, lubrication, and alignment. Do all you can to keep contamination out of the pump and out of the piping. Make sure the pumps under your care are getting the proper lubrication. And take drive alignment seriously. In the long run, you'll be making your job a lot easier.